The sun god and the moon goddess are apathetic to mortals. The sea god is hostile to them. The earth god covets their worship. The pleasure god sees them as playthings, the death god as cattle and the hunt goddess as children. Only the war god appreciates them truly and respects them. Story 1. They look at them, and they praise them. They bow before the gods and build great things in their honor, never questioning them, always being obedient to the will of the gods as preached by the priests. How would they react, if they knew how little they care for them? The words of prayers do not reach the cold and sterile halls of the moon goddess, nor would she care about them if they could. She is a tragic figure, who longs for a love she can never have. She has not thought of, or even noticed mortals, for thousands of years. The sun god sings his own praises, shines without a care, and acts more like a glowing peacock than a god. He only loves himself and his light. The praise of mortals are to him worth nothing, as they can never hope to match him in anything, and thus he doesn't care. The sea, her shape massive, her thoughts unknowable, her design incomprehensible, she does not love them, and should they be found on her massive planet covering flesh, they will not be spared from the storm or the high waves. She has no mercy, and the prayers of mortals are nothing compared to the endless songs of her beloved whales or the secrets that the giant squids whisper into her endless depths. A hungry god, the god of the land, the earthen deity, sees them as the best willing subjects one could have. In his endless palace, those willing servants wait upon his every need, so he covets and enjoys their subservience to him. The hedonistic god-goddess of pleasure, who is all shapes and none, who is that pleasure which only those who love pain can find, and the glorious rapture found in the most passionate love. They see the mortal races as toys, to be used and broken as they deem fit. Death sees them as a harvest to be collected or a herd of cattle to be thinned. The goddess of the hunt has some love for them, but it is strange, for she sees them as children, and take them into her care to be remade into stronger things. It is not for nothing that the children of men are warned never to let their young wander the woods at night, lest the huntress supreme takes them in, and shapes them to be man-beasts, the races of lycanthropes and other war creatures. In this, she means well, for she does it to protect the mortals from the monsters of the world, and yet she does not stop to ask, nor would she care to know, if her works are a curse or a blessing. After all, she is a god, and like all gods, she knows that she knows better than the mortals. Yet the mortal races still pray to them. Even here, even at the edge of everything, they still pray to them. I see them, clutching the emblems of their patron gods, see them sing hymns, see them bury the dead with reverence and pleas for their safe passage to whatever comes next. In this trench, there is more faith than in any temple or cathedral. Only one God is not prayed to. Only one singular deity is not sought for succor in this dire hour. The war god. The god of soldiers. The juggernaut that tramples the world. The sword king god. He who is the Apollyon, the destroyer, the conqueror of nations. Atop his flaming steed he charges at all foes. With his infinite blade, he carves the could-have-beens into the fated dead. With his axe he tears down the gates to every city. There are no temples to him. There are no prayers. There is no love for the god of the blood madness and the berserk. Here I sit, waiting for the moment when we will go over the top, charging into the machine gun bullets of the enemy. Around me sits my fellow soldiers. My fellows in this war. Their eyes are sunken. Their hands shake after every artillery strike. Their faces, once young and fresh, full of hope and optimism, has aged immensely. They do not think of their homes. They do not think of their families. They do not even think of victory. To think of anything abstract and wonderful like that would break them. To remember the proud words of a father, to be embraced by a mother, to laugh with siblings. To remember such things now, that would make them weep like children again. And they would never recover. 2 times, our company has charged uphill. Twice have we been repulsed. One of them, Private Leschep, shakes more than normally. Her face is near to the breaking point, but she toughens through it. I reach out my hand and place it on her shoulder. And instantly, she is calmed. She knows that her sergeant is here. That SGT. Milo Werzo, who has been here ever since the war started, will keep her safe. It is a lie. I cannot keep her safe. I can only march alongside her, and PVT. Leshenko, CPL. Frinko, and all the others in my small unit. They are good soldiers. Damn good soldiers. And yet, they are likely to die, come the moment when we will go over the top. When we charge across the barren wastelands that this war has caused. I hope they'll live. Because they have so much to live for. Leshenko, he has a wife and kids back home. His oldest son takes care of the bakery, and does well enough. Zashin, he used to draw so well. I hope that he will live, so that his hand one day can be still and steady again. Though the shell shock, as they call it these days, will be with him forever. Frinko is tough. Tough as old leather. She's been here for nearly as long as I have. I love that she has been strong for 5 long horrible years in the trenches. 5 years of death, sickness, and blood. For no good reasons. I will take her home when this is done, and I will do what I can to make her remember what it is like to be human. She has spent too long time near me, and must be taught to be something normal. Of course, I was here the day the war began. I was in the chambers the day negotiations broke down. I was there when the first soldier fired that first shot. I was there when the beautiful forests that once spread over this land was chopped down or destroyed by sustained artillery fire. I was there, 30 years ago, when that last war left resentment and bitterness that grew like weeds until populists manipulated by a military-industrial complex grown out of control demanded that the people should bleed over something as banal as territory. I was there during every battle of the last war. And I will be here in every battle to come. I was there when the first tribe that lived poorly, saw a tribe that lived well, and turned their clubs and slings against them. I was there when the mortal races fought for 100 years to wipe out the dragons. I am the god of war. And I am the only god that likes mortals. Because I have spent thousands of years fighting with them. I have been in every army. I have been an artillerist, a chariot racing warrior, a blade master, a knight, a sword dancer, one of the axe-wielding warriors of the cold north, and the scimitar-wielding hordes that came out of the dry east. Atop horseback, I have ridden across steppes, fought in frozen wastelands, on ships, and now that aerial combat is beginning, I believe I shall soon ride a black plane through the skies. Every war, I have stood side by side with mortals, and learned to respect them. Respect and appreciate them in a way that I have never loved my divine siblings. I've fought besides men who with their grace and gentleness would serve as far greater gods than any I've ever known. I've battled men with such a knowledge of the blade and of war, that they might have been able to fight the gods and win. In 1,000 camps, 1,000 men have shown me drawings of their wives back home. On 1,000,000 fields, I've withstood charges with men who I'd give my immortal life for in a second if I could. I've been a general on high, a father to my men, guiding them to victory in 100 battles. I've stood atop a tall ship, smiling with glee as the greatest admiral in the world kissed me before we sailed to our deaths together, all to ensure the survival of a kingdom that didn't deserve her. Story 2. And now I'm here. Sergeant is a rank I've often held. A good balance of command and responsibility. I reach into my coat, and withdraw 2 metal flasks containing strong alcohol. I pass them to my men, wordlessly. They each imbibe. And the fire they drink gives them strength for the battle ahead. Truly, I am not supposed to give out the vintage of the heavens to mortals, but the other gods do not care for me, and the feeling is mutual. I see the effect of the divine nectar on them. Their minds focus. Their bodies no longer feel the tiredness after 24 hours of sustained artillery bombardments against the enemy. For a brief moment, I see them as they were. The wonderful people they were before they were sent to die. The drinking of the flask is a blessing. It will keep them safe. I will not end this day with any more dead. Because they've fought for so long, and for so little. The charge today is foolish. It is madness. Even I, who is war incarnate, knows this. Nothing will be won by this. And yet, the officers insist. Despite the fact that the armistice begins in a day. We could have held the line, and not given more lives to the slaughter. I give a fatherly smile to my good soldiers. Who have been cunning and resourceful. Who have given up so much in this war. Who have given so much of themselves, only to be filled instead with the execution of my purpose. They would die for me, in this moment. Even as they pray to the other gods, they are mine. And they have, and will continue to, made me so very proud. They haven't broken down. They've been wounded. They've been damaged. There's a wound that will never heal. But they will emerge from this alive. The officers, up-jumped fools who've only got ancestry to thank for giving them command today, they call us to stand ready. To be prepared. And despite how much I wish I could stop this, I cannot go against my function. I cannot stop what I am. I can only hope that one day I will never have to awake upon another battlefield. My soldiers stand beside me. The piping voice of the captain tells us to have our weapons at the ready, as if we haven't done this before. The shrill sound of the whistle pierces our ears. And over the top we go. While I am incarnated here in one body, in one flesh receptacle, I am also inside of everyone that charges now. I feel their hopes and dreams, I see their desire to live. Their hatred of the officers and the politicians. I see the men we are to charge against. They don't want to be here. They want to be at home, doing good deeds, speaking good words, and thinking good thoughts. I of course also see those who are mad dogs, the rabid fools. Those who love blood and death, and who will go home to become officers that will push for more blood and more death. Those I influence, with divine power, to run slightly wrong. Steering them into the path of the bullets, shifting a death from one soldier to another. I see the disapproving face of the god of death as he collects the fallen soldier, but he will not complain. A death is a death. To the reaper, what does it matter which soldier falls? We reach the other side, and begin clearing the trenches. The men here are sickly, skeletal, and only want to go home and rest. I cannot grant them that. I cannot give peace. I can only bring more death, more war, more destruction. My rifle fires with holy accuracy and precision, and my sacred bayonet pierces flesh. Until it is over. The last battle of the last day of the war. A meaningless victory. A hollow day. There are none who celebrates. The closest we come is that Leshenko, his arm bandaged, his face aged another decade, notes that none of us in our unit fell. We're wounded. Sure. But we are not dead. We sit and wait for supplies to arrive. I share the flask again. And I go out to listen to the men. And I smile. Things are changing. At last, this final madness have driven them beyond insanity, back to a cold reason built on the foundations of a madness that must never arise again. The men talk of a different type of war. One that is still holy in my will, but much more amenable. They rage against the faith, for telling them this was a holy war. They rage against the politicians, for telling them this was a just war. And they rage against the officers, for telling them this would be a quick war. I will be there when those who have been sacrificed for nothing will be remembered. And those who suffered through these 5 long years of constant trench warface, will remember who sent them here to die underneath my holy sky, upon my great and holy altar. I see it beginning now. And as my physical body is not starting to turn to a mist made from rust and blood, I can tell that war is just beginning. A different kind of war. Extending my mind, I begin to steer the thoughts of every soldier along the front line towards that same conclusion. Towards the beginning of a new, and different kind of war. Already I see the soldiers breaking into the command HQ. I see them dragging out the generals, who'd sacrifice 500,000 men for a mile of land. I see them killing the officers, all of them who were elites and nobles. I walk back to my men, looking at me with a hunger I know well. They have a desire for a change. Throughout the whole of the war I have been planting the seeds of this in their minds, in all minds. In every mind of every lower-ranked soldier, I have been whispering. They will march home to the capital. They will finally do what I know they are capable of. They will, in every nation involved with this world-spanning war, overthrow the bloody monsters who sent them here. Destroy those who profited off of death. And put a final nail in the coffin to those who'd gladly sacrifice lives for national arrogance. It will be a war where I am no longer needed. Where the battlefield does not summon me. Where I will rest until the day that the mortals will wage a final war against the gods, subduing them once and for all. In that war, I know which side I will be on. The same as I was on in this war. Story 3. For all of the clashes that have taken place between science and religion over the centuries, our species' first official meeting with a god was a matter of pure chemistry. Sure, there have always been those who have claimed to hear the voice of God, and hell, maybe some of them were even right, but the first verified meeting was between Stacy S. on the 3rd clinical trial of the drug now known as Augurin. Augurin wasn't meant to be a cyclic, and given that the things it showed us were true, I'm not sure it's the right term anyway. It was supposed to foster clear-headedness and cancel out the feelings of mental fogginess that some drugs can cause. The first 2 trials were promising but needed a few tweaks. However, it was the 3rd trial where things really started to get interesting. When asked about how the drugs had affected her, Stacy said that her thoughts felt clearer for the first time in years. The researcher talking to her went through the usual questions about possible side effects and received a promising no to each one until they got to the dreams question. "I don't know," Stacy said. "I mean, you said any nightmares, strange or disturbing dreams? And I haven't had any nightmares. Not even any bad dreams. But definitely a weird one." The researcher debated whether or not to write it down. If it wasn't even unpleasant, then this wasn't the kind of dream they were concerned about, but for the sake of completion he decided to ask. "What was the dream?" "I met the Earth God." "Is that a character from a book?" the researcher asked, his pen poised. "I don't know who that is." "Was there any reason this was strange?" Stacy laughed. "It's nobody from a book, it was just one of the gods. I dreamed that I was in a large wooden hall that was growing and shifting around me, and I could see several gods, but he was the only one who came to talk to me." The researcher scribbled down Earth God dream with disinterest. "I see. And why was it strange?" "Because it was real. I've been a Christian all my life, but one talk with this man in a dream and I'm convinced he was a realier god than the one I'd been taught about since before I was even old enough for school. He was nice, too. Wanted me to like him. And I did like him, very much." After Stacy had left, the researcher decided to ask the other participants about their dreams from now on. Dreaming about a god wasn't all that strange, but a dream about a god that was so intense that it caused a participant to switch religions on the spot was a bit more so. Once they were pressed for specifics, all participants had similar dreams to Stacy. Too similar, in fact. Whilst not every participant spoke to the Earth God, all recalled being in the same hall of living wood, and though not every god was present in every dream, their descriptions of gods between participants overlapped with each other. It could have ended there. That research participants who were never supposed to talk to one another were having dreams about the same thing meant that the study was compromised, surely. But for his own reasons, the researcher asked some of the participants to ask the gods specific questions that the participant themselves would have no way of knowing. Not every god answered. The sea god despises being approached, whereas the pleasure god answered in riddles. The sun god and the moon goddess would occasionally answer but would ignore the question more often than not. When the questions did get answered though, that's when the fun started. Because those answers were always right. Even when the researcher decided to ask one participant what was going wrong with a friend's chemistry experiments, a question that the participant couldn't have possibly known the answer to and had to have repeated to him 3 times just to memorize, it was still right. Other scientists were called in and the research focus shifted away from its uses as a possible psychiatric drug to if it could help people figure out breakthroughs in science, war, and medicine. Different institutions admitted that these were real gods at different times. Some still insist to this day that it's either delusions or an elaborate hoax. But trials went on and on, figuring out which god was which and asking them increasingly specific questions, which to this day the sea god hasn't answered once. Death has been asked what happens next, and whilst the answer isn't available to the public, he has answered. The goddess of the hunt was asked the location of a serial killer, and whilst she broke the answer down in terms you'd use around toddlers, she still gave up the correct information. My job though, is to ask the gods about themselves. I could have gotten in a test subject to take the ocarina and act as a go-between, but at this point we already know that the drug's safe, and the less money I have to spend on security clearance to give a stranger the ability to talk to literal gods the better. I took the pill before bedtime and waited excitedly to fall asleep. The description of the hall hadn't done it justice. It was warm and welcoming whilst still being more luxurious than any hotel I'd ever seen. The sea god was physically closest to me, but I had decided that he was definitely last on my list to ask any questions. The war god was second closest, and I asked for permission to sit next to him. Of course. Would you like some of the wine? I hadn't really thought about eating or drinking in the dream. Given that I wasn't sure if it could intoxicate me here, I politely refused. I would like to ask you some questions though, is that okay? The war god shrugged. Okay. I wanted to know, why do you treat humans as equals? He looked confused. The other gods don't. I added, hoping that would make things clearer. They all treat us in different ways, but you're the only one who treats us as an equal. You don't know? The war god asked in surprise. It's just a matter of how things are made. When they made you, the sun and moon were far away and so they don't care much for or about you. The earth grew you from his very skin and yet you have harmed him, so I suppose he sees you as wayward children in a way. Pleasure gave you some of your main drives but only sees you as playthings because he's unable to see anything any other way. Death sees you as drones, cattle or statistics because you are always desperately seeking distance from him, so to see you otherwise would hurt. The hunt goddess gave you drives that you desperately needed as early humans but don't use so much anymore, so she sees you as incapable. I thought about this for a while, doing my best to memorize it, before realizing what was missing. But you aren't any of those. You like and respect us without pandering to us. So how did you make us? The war god looked at me in confusion. I thought you would understand. I act like this because I didn't have any part in making humanity at all. Humans made me. Hey, thanks for watching. If you want to see more, YouTube thinks you might like these videos.